What's up, everybody? It's Soren Baker here on the Soren Baker Show. Thank you for tuning in and listening around the world on the Digital Soapbox Network and on Unique Access Entertainment. Thank you very much for making this show successful. And for our new listeners, welcome. Today, what we're going to do is bring back one of our esteemed guests because the first part of our interview, we had so much that we were discussing that it ended up not covering nearly enough of his work in the game, and I felt like he was being shortchanged, and I didn't want to do that to him or to the audience because our guest today is Kwame.
Thank you, Soren. We're here to express our feelings, and because remember the last interview, everybody felt that your voice was so warm and cuddly, so we're changing this whole narrative into expressing feelings and letting out your inner child and telling us all your problems. The warm line is 1-800-SOREN MD.
There you go. But yeah, I did think it was funny that I got a lot of those comments because that's just how I talk.
That's right. You keep it cool and mellow, man.
Yeah, man. That's what it is. But as we get into part two, for those that are just joining this, make sure you go back and listen to part one. It's a phenomenal interview.
Yes.
Kwame gave so many amazing stories. Some I'd only heard about, but I'd never actually heard from him. And then I learned so much. And that's something that I noticed that we got in the comments section, and then people that watched it that I'm friends with were like, man, Kwame got so many stories. And even I was telling Dana Dane, because you and I, among other things that we share, we've also never smoked, drank, done any drugs or anything. And Dana Dane was like, Kwame's got so many stories because he remembers everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he was never hard drunk like we were.
Yeah, right.
But that being said, Kwame, one of the things that we did not discuss on part one that I thought was important or interesting on the Boy Genius album, The Man We All Know and Love, which was a single, but it was also the longest song on the album.
Yep.
And on top of that, that was, I think, the song more than any other that you really had all these different characters and the voices, and you were breaking the song up in all these different ways with the beat changes, the voices, and all these different things. So as a rapper producer, right out the gate, what was the inspiration and how and why did this song get executed that way?
Well, there was several inspirations. The funny thing was that song was done more or less as just joking around because the original credit to that song wasn't supposed to be Kwame. The original credit was a character named Hemi, and Hemi was short for He Is Me. And anytime I would do it, like a Humpty Hump type situation.
And that Hemi is the one who gets the credit as a songwriter, too, on that song. Yes. For those that have the album, go look at it.
So Hemi has a higher pitched voice, usually throws an English accent like Rick and Dana and the rest of the Kango crew. That was just my thing. Like when I was a kid, I was obsessed with the Kango crew. And luckily, I felt like I had a pass because I knew Dana, and I ended up meeting Rick, which is a whole nother weird, funny story on my introduction, how I met Slick Rick. And so making that song, I was doing my story raps in their fashion, but what I did was when I recorded it very slow. I made the beat and then we slowed the tape down and I rapped normally. So when we sped the tape back up, my voice would sound like more chipmunkish. Okay. And that's how Hemi came about. And I think that technique was used, a lot by Prince. It was used a lot by Stevie Wonder. It was used by the Beatles as well. So just reading up on studio techniques, I wanted to try it as well. As far as the beat goes, I literally layered, I don't know how many beats I layered, maybe 4 or 5 beats in that. But I layered all the beats to sound like one cohesive beat and then drop each layer out, on the different parts of the song. And then I did most of the most of the girl voices. I did all the girl voices, but then the background voices I dragged Herbie in there. So I slowed the tape down real low because Herbie has a much deeper voice, and he did some like if you hear like girls on the thing talking about me. Like, who does he think he is? He's that's me and Herbie sounding. Like if you go backwards and you really look at it, you're like, this is real suspect looking at these two dudes in it. But yeah, that's how that song came about.
And then was Slick Rick the direct inspiration for having the voices and doing the girl voices, or how did that specific element of it come about?
Rick, I can say, I would say Rick was a direct inspiration, but I'm trying to think, did Rick have, Rick did have, I'm trying to think, did I hear Mona Lisa yet at the time? Like the only things that I was aware of a lot of Rick basement tapes and live park jam. So the things that I probably drew inspiration from maybe never saw the light as a record, but I think, trying to think back, I think I originally wanted a girl to actually do those parts, and I couldn't get somebody to come to the studio, so I did the parts and was like, whatever. And a secret dream job of mine has always been a secret dream job. I always wanted to do cartoon voices, so it was just like, I will do any kind of voice on a record at any given time.
Okay. So have you made any real efforts or
no?
You haven't tried to really pursue that?
No, I'm a slacker.
Why?
But I think I would give up making music to do cartoons. I'd probably,
really?
Yeah, I probably would.
Wow.
Or at least an old man, like, that would be my new career.
Okay.
I'm too old to rap. I don't really want to make any beats like that. I'm going to do cartoons. I would do it.
Okay. Well, Slick Rick has the very cartoon element to his music at times. So what is the story of how you met Slick Rick?
So I walk into the studio and Dana's in the studio, and as I'm walking in, one of the engineers say, I just need to give you a heads up. Someone was using the same idea as you, and we just had to let them know that you already had a song like that. I'm like, what are you talking about? So I walk into the studio and I see my tape. It says Sweet Thing. And I hear a beat sort of like Sweet Thing being done, and I lost it. Somebody's jacking my song before it even comes out. What the hell? I bust in the room. What the fuck? Who's taking my... Like, I don't know. I was like a little hothead as a kid. I'm not even going to lie to you.
Okay.
And I don't know why. Maybe your therapeutic voice can help me figure that out. But I'm beefing like, who the fuck is jacking my shit? And Dana runs out the booth. Chill. It's your boy. He made the beat. I'm like, who? I don't know who this fucking guy is. That's Rick. I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, my idol's right there, but I didn't, for some reason, he didn't, he's not all ricked out,
Right.
So I'm just thinking it's some guy Dana got to
Rick
make
Walters.
a fake version of Sweet Thing.
Wow.
And Rick is dying laughing. Dana's laughing. I'm not even out yet. I'm just a 16-year-old kid having a fit. And he was like, Rick had an idea to make Sweet Thing, a version of Sweet Thing for Dana, but when they heard mine, they decided to not do that.
Okay.
And that's how I met Slick Rick. Tell you, I got 1 million of these.
That's a crazy story.
Kwame Gump.
So how did so they just did that to set you up, or they?
No. They were in the process. They were making the song.
Okay.
And literally a couple of minutes before I walked in, my engineer John heard them making the song and came in and was like, "Yo, I just want to let you guys know, Kwame has a song off of this beat, off of Shaka Khan's Sweet Thing." And I think the engineer, the studio people kind of, I was like their little brother or whatever, and I used a lot of the studio staff on my records. You know, one of the staff members was a singer. He sang the hook to Sweet Thing.
Okay.
My engineer was a guitar player, so he played the guitar on Sweet Thing, and half of the other. I always pulled people in. The receptionist, I think I used her for something. So they all looked out for me, where anybody else was just coming in, paying studio time.
Right.
You know, they didn't want, you know, this, they're not going to let a record that they're on not come out. They're going to try to protect it. So big shouts to John, Dave, Jimmy.
And then you were one of the early artists signed to Atlantic Records.
Yes.
Atlantic, much later, for a long time after you left the label, Atlantic had kind of a dry spell for a long time.
Yeah.
And even when you were there weren't that many rappers that were on Atlantic. So,
yeah, there's a reason, though.
Please explain.
So when I got there, as I walked in, Light was already there with First Priority. Then D.O.C. came in because of the success of Michelle A. This was all around the same time. And the head of Atlantic was Sylvia Rhone, the Wizard of Oz. And when they decided to separate hip-hop from all other things on Atlantic, and they created a subsidiary label called Atlantic Street, which I was super against. I was super against that. And so Atlantic Street started to take on a life of its own and not receive the same treatment as, say, Gerald Levert on Atlantic, or, you know, Levert or whoever else was there. You know, our A&R staff were either house DJs, but I remember
shout out to Doug Lazy on Atlantic.
Yeah, Doug was on Atlantic. Yep. So we had, like, from New York had a big house music scene, so they were starting to hire all the house guys.
Craig G.
Yep.
His album The Kingpin was very.
Yeah, it was on Atlantic.
It was on Atlantic, and it was about half and half house, half hip hop.
So especially like 1987 New York hip hop scene, everybody wanted to have a house record. So they were bringing all these house DJs, but the one A&R that I took the most to was a classic jazz A&R. You know, so I would play my records for this guy, and he was old enough to be my grandpa, and so everybody was a much older non-hip hop staff. Okay. And then they separated to Atlantic Street. And then Sylvia gets her own label under Elektra, East West.
Right.
And pretty much leaves me on Atlantic, and then starts her own thing, starting with In Vogue, and brings a couple of other people over there.
MC Light she took.
Yeah, she took Light. And so East West, people on East West had a better shot. People on Atlantic Street just was not. It just wasn't a cool place to be, man. Then I remember the new president at the time, who will remain nameless, was introducing me as K Solo. You know, shit like that. I was like, you know what?
Wow.
Even though me and K Solo were cool, but we were nothing alike.
Yeah.
So, you know,
really
it was not a cool place to be.
But on to other things. With the second album, one of the early first concept albums in rap, A Day in the Life of Polkadelic Adventure.
Yeah.
On that one, that also signaled you being more known as the producer. Because I think with The Boy Genius, of course, people thought Herbie did it all or had his hand in it or whatever.
Yeah, I was emancipated. So, no, seriously. Like, legally, I was emancipated. Right. And pre The Day in the Life, everything had to go through Herbie. I was a minor, so everything had to go through courts and parental signing and everything. It was no direct contact with me and anything legal. So my parents, they were going through a divorce. They had no idea. They just was like, hey, let's make the kid happy, you know. And they were super supportive. My parents were never like, they were 1,000% supportive. So they just wanted me to follow my dream. but didn't have the knowledge of what I was really doing and how it should be represented. And Herbie's from the neighborhood. We can trust this guy. He lives around the block. And that's cool. You know, Herbie was running a business. I have nothing against Herbie. I literally just talked to him 2 days ago. So there's nothing. I have no bad blood, but that was his thing. He had a production company. He had people under the production company. He had publishing on people. He had production on people, and that's what was on paper. But when I turned 18 and I had to re-sign, one of my things was, okay, I'm 18 now. You got to give me my production credit.
Mm-hmm.
Period. It's just not going to happen. And even though I was still business tied to Herbie, you know, everybody understood that I was literally doing all the legwork, and it wasn't a problem because of the success of Boy Genius, and that's how that flipped.
So that being said, at that time in the game, obviously there's the people that were around you guys or around the Invincibles that you maybe toured with or were in the studio with knew that. But when you would go around the country or you'd meet artists that weren't really in your real circle, how did things change for you once A Day in the Life came out and your name was on there as producing it?
I don't think anything really changed too drastically.
Okay.
I think musicians recognize other musicians. So if I'm around a Dr. Dre or a Teddy Riley or Hank Shockley or any of these guys, we can have those conversations. And I think the word was out way before that, because I remember like just some random Teddy going, "Yeah, man, how did you make the rhythm?" You know, and this wasn't a public thing, so people clearly talk about it. Or musicians understand how other people's music sounds. So there have been conversations with other producers, and they'll come up to me and, "You made that beat, didn't you?" Because I know Herbie didn't make that beat, because he makes beats like this, and your beats sound like that. So there has to be some sort of different thing going on.
Well, it's funny you say that, because not understanding how music was made really as a kid, but listening to all the music you're discussing, it was a dramatic difference.
Yeah.
Sonically, the way the songs are structured, the choruses, just everything is dramatically different.
Yeah. I think Herbie has a pulse on how to make a record that is easily digestible to everybody. I overthink my records. So my production and my writing and my hooks and everything, they're always going to skew to the left, where Herbie knows exactly what should be on the radio, what will sell 1 million records. Like he was the master at that. And I think I could have learned a little bit from him, but I think the more I tried to do that, the less weight my stuff would have. Even though my stuff was still lighthearted, there was a depth to that music where I thought if I would have tried to oversaturate it with some pop stuff, it was just not. I would not be able to look in the mirror.
Okay. And then also with the Polkadelic Adventure, you had one of the Big Boys songs, which is another one that I really liked on there, that has, not that it sounds Herbie-esque, but it's more along those lines of a commercial sounding type of song.
Yeah.
And you had also kind of slid in there with the dude with the Gangster name and all that stuff. So this is also when gangster rap's coming out. You're having probably the biggest song of your career with Only You. How did you see rap changing once you had this album out and you were touring it and promoting it? What differences did you see on the road, just overall with rap's growth, but then also with gangster rap?
I think with songs like One of the Big Boys, those accounts in that song are 100% real things and based on real life situations. You know, I say little things and they're not stabs at anybody, but I remember when I was younger, pre-Boy Genius, I wanted to be Slick Rick Dana Dane period. So in one of the big boys, I address it. I don't have the silk suits and the $100 bellies, and I'm not that guy. I'm not the the gangster name. There was it took place where I know teenage girls that I was into started dealing with these drug dealer dudes instead of wanting to rock with me because I wasn't quote unquote cool enough, and it was just me grappling with those insecurities that I had. But at the same time, I think the good thing, the way these records turned out was based on the touring that I had with the boy Genius, and I got to see. New Yorkers have this false sense of superiority, and at that time, New Yorkers felt that all things New York were all things, period.
Right. They still do to a large degree.
Yeah. But New York has lost its sense of self. New York rappers want to rap like an Atlanta rapper at this point. So a lot of New York rappers, not all. But back then, it was just about lyrical New York rap, and you didn't know anything else. So when you get on the road with a Too Short, and you get on the road with a D.O.C. or a J.J. Fad or N.W.A., and you see Ghetto Boys, you see these different Shadi, you see Two Live Crew, you're seeing all this different vibe, and you're seeing that the people take to this stuff way more than they take to who you thought was the dopest, and it's kind of, it's almost, it feels like the kid that believed in Santa Claus and found out that there was no such thing as Santa Claus.
Right.
So now it's life on Mars. It's like, oh wait, hold up. This is a whole nother world, and I don't even know if I fit into this world because I'm never going to rap about this stuff.
Right.
And I see this stuff starting to pull in a lot of change and a lot of audience and a lot of different types of audience. When we would do Public Enemy shows and NWA shows, for all intents and purposes, the majority of the audience weren't black. So we would see things that we would never think. And I think when it came down to starting to make more music for the second album, I felt that I needed to be a little bit more melodic, a little bit more palatable, and maybe it can help my my reach a little bit more. And then at the same time, Herbie was in my neck about being more pop oriented, but I was never gonna do like, how rappers will always have like a reggae record on the album and then like a pop record, what they considered a pop record, so they'd be rapping over like, I don't know, like how Fat Boys did Wipeout, stuff like that. I was like,
yeah, the Fat Boys were doing Beach Boys, Chubby Checker,
yeah, man,
they were doing all kinds of stuff.
I just couldn't. It worked for them, but I just knew it. If I would have done it, I don't know, man. I might not even be here to talk to you. Flash forward, I don't know, man.
But I always thought too that
could have been Rich though.
Yeah, Rich is always good. I wouldn't
Some
know
people.
though. I wouldn't know, but. The thing that I also thought was cool that you also though maintain was the comedy with the Leave It to Weaver, some of the the lines that you had throughout the album. And the thing that I thought was interesting is that you are from the era of supreme lyricism, and you infused a lot of that into your music.
Yeah.
So why do you think that wasn't something that people latched onto for in the way that they did other artists?
I think it was the approach. People judge books by covers. I don't care what anybody says, what they tell you not to do. People will judge a book by a cover. So when you approach the masses looking other than, you're never going to get the full ear and eye of those people. So I think also, I think that rap, how do I put it? I think there was a little bit too much comedy. I think that when you leave a teenager to his own devices, a teenager will act like a teenager. And looking back at it, I think that I wish I had a more of a checks and balance, older person around that I respected enough to be like, okay, calm that down. Tune that up. You know, somebody like that. But by the second album, I was just a kid running wild, you know.
So what was Herbie doing on the second album, and why didn't he fill that role for you?
I think Herbie had a lot on his plate. You know, Herbie had, you know, House Party was in full motion. You know, Salt and Pepper was at the top, you know, and the tertiary acts kind of fell to the wayside. And I think the thing that was to my benefit was that I can just go into the studio and make records.
Right.
Where other people had to wait and make records.
The benefit of producing yourself.
Yeah, and I think, you know, and I was, you know, luckily I was smart enough, I will say this, I was smart enough to buy equipment. I was never the kid with the big expensive car. I was never the kid with all the jewelry like that. So I invested in me, and that saved my life. It continues to save my life. So just from the one investment of MPC 60, you know,
wow.
and I think doing that really turned it around, because I wasn't, you know, unlike the first album, I had to go to the studio and make tracks. Second album, I'm in my bedroom making beats. I'm actually the cover of the Boy Genius now, and I'm bringing this stuff, and I'm, you know, enhancing in the studio, but I'm saving money at the same time, and I'm coming fully equipped and with songs.
It's funny you say that. That's, people don't know about pre-production.
Yeah.
It's a lost art.
Yeah.
Because I've been, as I'm sure you have, as a producer, which we got to get to as well. But the thing that always amazes me is that unless people have their own studio, which of course a lot of people do, and I'm not talking about a home studio, I'm talking about a real studio. Like, they'll rent the studio and then, you know, take an hour to get settled and then a couple hours to talk.
Yo, don't even get me started on that one.
Yeah.
That is the money trap, and labels love for you to do it. They want you to smoke, they want you to drink, they want you to bring as many girls to the studio at $2,500 a day, and they just want you to figure it out. And the more you figure it out, the less you have in the back end. And this has been going on since 1953, and no one is getting that picture. But, you know, that's a whole nother. We can go into that later.
But one thing about labels you had told me also was that when you were first coming up, that they didn't want you to cuss. They didn't like it when people were talking about smoking or doing drugs. So what was that environment, and why did that change, do you think?
Unfortunately, money changes morality. You know, like I said, to you, you know, behind the scenes, my A&R were old enough to be my parents. So I remember Only You, and in the line in Only You, I'm not the kind of guy who just like to slam bam, thank you ma'am, then I'm through. I remember the original line was, I'm not the kind of guy who just like to slam bam, thank you ma'am, get a quick screw. That was the original line, and they were like, you got to take that out.
Wow.
You have to take that out.
That's so racy.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe it wasn't all rap across the board, but it was me. They're like, you're not that kid. Don't become that kid. And it went from don't be that kid to when Naughty by Nature was out, rocking, and it was turning into the grimy 90s. And I'm using Naughty by Nature specifically for a reason. Me being cool with KG and start. I actually lived around the corner from KG when I bought my first house, and seeing where they come from with their records, understanding it, because it kind of lent to the way I came with records, but more on a harder edge, just production value and stuff like that. I remember them sitting me down, A&R saying, "Yo, man, you got to lose the suits. Get you some Timbs, man. We'll go buy you something. Get you some Timbs, some overalls, like a lumberjack shirt. You know, like how Tretch does it. You got to toughen up, man." I said, "So you want me to be me with a baseball bat, pretty much?" And that was the consensus. I would, because then it was like, let's find other producers. Let's find some writers. And I'm sitting there like, word. And I don't know if I would have taken that direction, what would have happened. But what I do know, that I felt like, that I do know that I made a pledge to myself to never lose my quote unquote soul in the music industry. I was never going to be that guy. So I'm like, okay, I'm 21, 22. I can just go to college and just fuck all this,
But on Nasty, the LP cover, you did have the shiny boots.
Well, that was Doc Martens. That's a culture in New York. That's village culture. So it's like, we can get into Nasty in a second. But even Nasty was a result of those conversations, because it was like, I cannot be the gangster you want me to be, but I can talk about sex all day long. I have a lot of it. We can talk about this. I don't do drugs, I don't drink, but I got a lot of chicks. So let's talk about, let's dial that up if you want to be racy. And which I think was a mistake. I'm now 19 years old. Why am I doing all this talking about all of that all the time? It could have been, like I said, if I would have had someone other than a parent, because you as a teenager, your parents don't know anything when they know everything. In my head, somebody I respected musically outside of Herbie, because Herbie was the only older person that I super respected and knew musically.
Right.
But I wish that I had, or other people around me that were doing music that I could bounce ideas off of, and that would have no problem telling me no. Maybe some of the outcomes would be different. And I wouldn't, I would be able to listen to the criticism of an A&R a little bit better and be able to extrapolate the things that they were saying and tune it up and make it work for them and make it work for me. So, it's a whole coulda, shoulda, woulda thing that I don't ever regret. But
nah, I don't think in general that's a fool's game to play.
Yeah.
So I try not to play it myself.
But back to what you were saying, here I go. The game, you're seeing the game change. You're seeing gangster, more harder edge rap start to bubble up and really push guys like me to the back. And the only thing that I can think was, it was like how Common put it, and I used to love her. It was like seeing the baddest girl, the most wholesome girl you ever knew your whole life turn into the biggest whore in the world. It literally, that's how it feels. It still feels like that. That's how it feels. And it's like...
Well, let me ask you this then. What was different about it? Because I have my own ideas of what you might say, but I'm interested to get your insight on this. So as somebody that did tour and saw, the Too Shorts of the world, the Ghetto Boys, the NWAs, that to the one hand would represent and reflect everything you're saying, but that those guys not only are in the Too Shorts of the world, not only being pioneers, but also being like premier artists. What made that different, in your opinion, than what was happening in 92-ish, 93-ish?
I think, I don't know the personal lives of any of the premier gangster rappers. So from my standpoint, they all seem like regular kids. With the exception of maybe Easy. Being around Easy, you're like, okay, you know, he seems like a hustler. That's probably about it for me. Seeing the Ghetto Boys and being around them, I just feel like they have to be products of their environment. And if they're not products of their environment, I believe that they are. I don't know, but I believe that they are. But when I start to see rappers that I personally know turn into gangster rappers for the sake of getting a deal, then we have a problem.
Right.
And I'm starting to see that now. I'm like in 91, 92, I'm like, all right, why are you rhyming like Snoop? You're from Brooklyn. Like, what are you doing?
Right.
You know, I can't speak for a West Coast guy. I can do a show with them and then I go home. But for a Brooklyn guy, a Queens guy, a Harlem guy, and I start, you know, everything is it just starts to go left very quickly. And it goes even further left as time goes on when I see label executives adding fuel to the fire.
In what way or how?
We need to sign a guy like this. We don't need to sign a good record. We need to find a guy who got shot. We need to find a guy who has beef with this guy. I'm signing this rapper because he has beef with that rapper.
And we both, unfortunately, are well aware that happened more and more and more as time went on.
Yeah.
From your studying music history and your experience being around producers, musicians, etc.,
yeah.
to your knowledge, was there a time when people in signing or positions of power at record labels were like very specific, like find me a Prince guy, find me a Marvin Gaye guy? I know those
I'm pretty sure they were doing, yeah, I'm pretty sure that happened. But this is what happens when street culture permeates big business. A good business person says, let's hire that. So now you're not hiring. You know, it's weird. You go from, instead of hiring like a dope hip hop DJ, which people were doing, let's hire the street guy.
Right.
Yo, he's like, let's hire this drug dealer as an A&R guy, or, you know, I could be exaggerating, but it's
unqualified people /
yeah, but then but you go, what makes you qualified? What makes you qualified is because you are in and of the culture that we're trying to push. And the culture that we're trying to push is not necessarily music. Music is just an echo of the culture we're trying to push.
Right.
The same culture.
It's a trickle up.
Yeah, but the same culture that black artists have been trying to escape from for 40 years before that. So you now, for 40 years, 30, 35 years, because I'm going into, like 35, 40 years, from the 50s to the 90s, black artists from all walks of life, mostly impoverished, found an escape. And they found a way to present themselves other than what the stereotype was. And then all of a sudden, when the stereotype makes a lot of money, you now bring in any and everything to perpetuate that stereotype for the sake of money. Trust me, if tomorrow, if gay rap was the big thing, I guarantee you there will be rappers who are not gay making records saying that they're gay for the sake of making records.
The thing that's always intrigued me, frustrated, confused, confounded me about this very topic, about the type of rap that gets promoted, the type of rap that's out there, etc., is, in your opinion, what responsibility is on the shoulders of the artists compared to the labels?
Well, I think I am one of the few people that feel that artists have an extreme responsibility, especially in a successful artist. But for the most part, most artists are extremely narcissistic and very have tunnel vision, and their vision at the end of the tunnel is something that enriches them. And if you're in their close network, they could possibly benefit from it too. Very, very few artists, and usually the biggest of the big artists, think outside of that, and they think of a global thing, and they actually understand their platform and responsibility. So as a record label, I think that record labels, for the most part, they're numbers crunchers. Most A&R people, most heads of labels are not music people at all. In any situation, they're glorified accountants, and they want to bring in their bottom line. An A&R or a record executive is only good as their last signing. They're looking for their bonus. They're looking for, and that's business. I'm not nothing against them. We're not selling Bibles and worship studies or anything like that. We're selling
right.
rap music, for God's sakes. So this is what that is. And an artist, there are a lot of artists, especially rappers, from situations, from social economic situations, from just whatever, that want to get out,
mm-hmm.
or what they think is getting out, which is a financial thing, but don't understand that they're just dragging everything that they're trying to get away from with them, and the label doesn't care, because you look at it strictly business. Don't take everything personal away. I got this one guy. He's hot in the streets. Shot 20 people. He raps about it. He sells all this stuff. He raps about it. He has all this beef. He raps about it. But then he gets killed. I just sold 5 times more records than I would have sold if the guy was alive. Mm-hmm. I'm as a record label, you are benefiting now. You're going to automatically benefit off that death. Every rapper who has died, there is some guy collecting huge amounts of, not royalties per se, but sales. Mm-hmm. Sales of a record. It's not like they donated, somebody dies and all the sales and proceeds of a record are now donated to the whatever foundation.
Right.
No.
Not at all.
No, none. Nobody. No rapper. You can name them all who died.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's collecting a sale of that record, and it's enriching their company. Period. Mm-hmm. You want to give a percentage to charity? Fine. It makes you feel good. But so we know what we're dealing with, and we know what type of business we're in. I just think that what if the music industry were like the NFL or the NBA, and there's like morality clauses and stuff like that?
Be a very different game.
Would it work? You know what I'm saying? I don't think so, because people buy into the drama. People like that.
But I would disagree in the sense that the thing that I always thought was amazing about rap is that at the time of what I think is the golden era of rap, which is the 87 to 89, that era,
mm-hmm.
the most popular artists of that era were, I would argue, the most positive, most educated, most promoting being smart being an educated black man,
Mhm.
all this stuff that would theoretically be corny, but these were dudes that were strong, that were standing up, that were intelligent, that were
Well,
doing all these things that,
and they sold 250,000 records.
Public Enemy,
400,000
Boogie
records.
Down Productions,
A
Big Daddy
million records?
Kane. Yeah, I mean, they were going gold and platinum at a time when,
But then somebody Gangster comes out and sells 10 million
but
records.
the difference was at that time, the crossover artist was Run DMC or Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince.
2 million records.
Right, but they also weren't promoting what you would say
No, you're right.
a negative image of a black man, I would argue.
But when you have the president of the United States and his or a vice president of the United States wife
Oh, yeah.
beefing about something,
Right.
or the FBI looking into
Your lyrics.
your lyrics, that's rebel music.
Right.
That's what rock and roll was built off of.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole nother game now. Now it's like it's cool to buy into something that we're not supposed to buy into. We're supposed to buy into something educational.
Mm-hmm.
That's what every parent wants to do. That back in the days, a parent could go to their kid's room. They're blasting Public Enemy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Turn that crap off, and then the kid can easily say, "Just listen to what he's saying."
Right.
And that crap turns into art. Hey, if you think you could do that now to 95% of these rappers, hey, point them out.
Right. It's not as many,
No.
but I think that's the interesting thing is why I think so much has changed in that regard, because in the late 80s, and it continued for a couple years arguably, but the best artists, I would say, and the most popular by sales, by exposure, or what have you,
Mhm.
in general, were the Ice-T's,
Yeah.
the Boogie Down Productions, the Public Enemies, the Eazy-E's, all these guys that, while some of them had a lot of profanity and other stuff, like look at Too Short. He had Life is Too Short. He had
Mhm.
City of Dope. He had a lot of songs that were
And then
very...
they had Dope Man, which was not about
No.
just selling the dope. It was about
In fact, that's one of the most anti-drug dealing
Exactly.
songs and drug using songs.
Exactly.
On top of that, anyone that listens to Dope Man and thinks that that's promoting drugs is on drugs. Like they're not listening to what.
So did they fall victim to the same thing we're talking about? Because by second, third album, it wasn't even.
Well, I think the D.O.C. and I talked about this extensively, and I actually have this in my book, The History of Gangster Rap.
Mhm.
I interviewed D.O.C. and he talked about when Ice Cube left N.W.A., people didn't understand it, including him and including N.W.A., but they lost the soul of N.W.A. So that type of political undertone and underbelly that N.W.A. had on N.W.A. and the Posse, on Easy Does It, and on Straight Outta Compton, left with Ice Cube.
Yeah.
And then we got it clearly on America's Most Wanted, Kill It Will, Death Certificate, and so on.
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge, is that how do we navigate infusing intelligence as the premier artist did, and still push the music forward, still make it sound excellent, and still bring and discuss all these things, while still Boogie Down Productions, aka KRS-One, with edutainment. Like that's the, that album, but that term is like something that I think is so powerful and what made rap so amazing. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think I would. I don't want to keep going on this track because I definitely want to get into the production stuff. But I think that I'm not hating on anything current. I just want to be very clear about that. I think there is a culture that is out there that maybe a lot of people over 30 just don't understand.
Right.
And people under 30 are fully immersed in this culture, and we're getting that with the records that we're hearing. But I think that there's just a lack of diversity, creative diversity. And I think from back in the days, you did have your gangster dude, you did have your intelligent person, you did have your comic, you did have your, they were all sorts of people that could coexist together and make an equal amount of money. And I think labels now shove everything down a very narrow hole, and it turns into what we have now.
All right. And before we get to the production stuff, we got to talk about the Incognito album.
Oh yeah.
Because many reasons, but that album, your fourth album, and your first on Ichiban Records. So the interesting thing about that label was obviously they had Vanilla Ice, but they also had MC Breed, and they had a lot of other things that were very unorthodox. So how in the world did you go from Atlantic to Ichiban?
That was the biggest lesson of my life. The most important lesson of my musical life was doing that deal.
Please explain.
Many levels. One, I thought I was a very hot commodity in the rap game. And at the time, I was not. So I remember going into Sylvia's office, because Sylvia was still in charge of me, though I was not on East West.
Okay.
And I remember going to Sylvia's office, and I had on this black hoodie, these shades, and I had the hood up and the shades on. And I sat down at the office and I was like, I think I would like to be let go from my deal. And she was like, what the fuck? I was like, yes, I don't appreciate the treatment that I am having up at this label. And I feel that I am way more important of an artist than what you are doing to me. And I would like to be let go so I can go anywhere I would like to go. And she was like, are you sure about that? I am positive. I got the let go letter the next day. I'm thinking everybody's going to scoop me up. No one scoops me up.
And how long was that process?
Well, the Nasty album was held back 2 years.
Right.
So Day in the Life and Nasty was kind of recorded at the same time, in hopes to be a double album. But then I just tweaked and did more things to it, and then I was working on another artist album at the same time, and so that was like the beginning of the end when they started shelving my stuff. And then the process, what year did Nasty come out? 91, 92.
Yeah.
I think I turned it in 91. I don't remember the date of, I don't remember any album release date at all. So if it comes out in 92, Ichiban came in 93.
94.
No, but the deal.
Oh, the deal. Okay.
Came in 93. And just as a teenager, as a young person, a year felt like 20 years back then.
Oh, I know.
Like, I feel, and it's not about a health thing or anything. I feel younger now than I did back then. I felt like an old man at 22 years old with all the stress of the music stuff going on. I just felt like an old guy. And so Ichiban happened. I had this whack manager. I couldn't, I just couldn't get a foothold. I don't know. I just couldn't get a good grasp of who I can turn to at this point. So we deal with Ichiban, and we saw what Ichiban did with Breed. So now the lesson comes. We rent a car. We drive to Atlanta. Their offices were in an area called Smyrna, right outside of Atlanta.
Smyrna, Georgia.
And we get into the office, and I remember just seeing.
And had you already signed at this point, or you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I already signed. I already made the album. I made the album literally on a 4-track cassette tape, 4-track cassette, my MPC and my M1 keyboard in my. I ran out of money. I was living with my mom. I made it in my little brother's bedroom. Made the whole album.
Wow.
So I turn in. I have Incognito, and that's how I got the deal. Handing out demos and crap. Back to square one. And get to the office, The owner of the label, I can't remember his last name. His name is John. John was like 60-something-year-old Englishman. And it was tea time, so he had his tea, and he had these little model trains in the back. Hello, Kwame, and good to see you. We're very glad that you're joining our label. And I'm like, the fuck? And I remember just like, okay, and it's like, but you have to re-record the album. I'm like, okay, you know, we can use, we have a studio, and you have to re-record the album, no samples. You have nothing but samples on this album, and we're not paying for samples. All right. So lesson 1, mastering production without samples. I pulled out the style. I found every musician I could find in Atlanta, bringing singers in, recreating records, and it taught me how to do that under pressure. Lesson 2, coming from, I love the Incognito album. And I was coming from a standpoint of I was back to making pure records with no pretenses, no like, I don't know what's going to happen with this. I don't know where this is going to go. This is just me making songs that I like to make. Looking back, I think, I feel I'm a better musician. When I say musician, like keyboard player, player now. But back then, recreating these intricate jazz samples and doing things like that, it was very interesting. Just pulling jazz bands into the studio and just really going in production wise. Then the other lesson learned was, big or small, you can't really trust a record label like that. The reason you said that the album came out in 94, you know how I found out that album was out? I was in Tower Records looking for another record, and I saw my album on the shelf.
Whoa.
And I was like, what?
Wow.
So this is the biggest lesson. It taught me how to know the music industry, because they did nothing. I remember driving to radio stations on my own, just showing up. Hey, I got a new record out. Cold calling PDs, scheduling my own promotion runs, showing up at mom and pop stores, meeting the owners, talking to them about orders, doing this, that. I did, me and my manager, my road manager, Dave Locust, we were hand-to-hand combat. They had, promotion people, they didn't give a shit about us. They took us to I remember they took us to a store, to an in-store. We drove all the way like 12 hours somewhere in South Carolina, and then we get to the store and they're like, what y'all doing here? Things like that. It was the best, the worst period of my life. And everything I learned, I know now that I use professionally as a label owner, as a producer, I learned from Incognito.
Wow.
So I don't care if that record sold one copy. That was college for me.
I got mine.
Hey.
So yes. The interesting thing was, like, on the production side of it, like with Mac Tonight, Do That, and some of the other records, I thought, to me, because sonically, I thought like Polkadelic Adventure and Nasty had some similarities, but they were very different in a lot of ways also. I thought that Incognito was also very different. So all 4 of the albums had like a huge sonic disparity, in my opinion, and how you would use samples, how you would not use samples. So what did you notice when you did have to go re-record and you had this pressure? What did you find out about yourself as a producer and sonically?
Well, I found out that I needed to be a better engineer because my engineer was terrible.
Okay.
I found out that I needed to learn how to master records because the mastering was terrible. Found out that sometimes it is about the studio you go to, because the studio was like in some strip mall that was next to other businesses. We couldn't play the music loud. The businesses would come, the cops would come, and kind of a undertone racist type situation being out in outskirts of
Rural Georgia. Go figure.
It wasn't really like
Yeah.
what you think it is now. It wasn't
welcoming.
strip clubs and turning up. So like I said, I felt like I went to school. I if any, like my favorite records that I've done, the majority of them exist on Incognito. Like the song Winner is like one of my favorite records. I love Mac Tonight. I love Do That. I love
Free Clinic.
Free Clinic is a true story and one of my favorite records. I don't know, I got away with that sample, but it was 1,000% real, you know, and that was another thing. I was able to be 1,000% real. I think I did some cursing on that album, and but I was telling just like stories, man, stories that I like to tell. I was telling stories without trying to be like Slick or Dane. I was producing, not trying to be like anybody, but yet having elements. Because the thing that I really respected about West Coast production, it was a non-sample driven, outside of Dre, a non-sample driven art form, especially, and also being in Atlanta, that those productions that were coming out of there, I'm starting to see like, yo, you don't have to loop a James Brown record every time. You know.
And how long were you there?
I recorded that album. I was there for a month.
Okay.
So I did it. I re-recorded in a month. 3 weeks to a month. It felt like a year. You know, so like when I first got to Georgia, I was like, what am I going to do? By the time I was leaving, you know, also hooking up with MC Breed. I wish I had this videotape showing me, Breed. There was a kid from out of Ohio named Jabri, and Jabri was with Breed a lot, and it showed me another thing that I never saw.
Was he from Columbus?
I think so. I can't remember.
I know who you're
but I
talking
think his name. The album was Jabri's Wise Words. I think he had, and Breed had a nice home, a nice car, and I'm like, wait, I don't know any rapper that has this. I don't care unless you're LL Cool J or MC Hammer. Like nobody has this.
Right.
You know, I'm seeing other sides of things. Nicer homes, nicer cars, not knowing that John from the record label pretty much bought all the Breed stuff. Breed didn't own a thing, but it looked like he did.
Okay.
And it's no disrespect to the memory of Breed, but it was just same old Cadillac Records thing going on, man. And you know, so that it gave me another outlook. I'm like, do I want to be Muddy Waters out here, or do I want to make my own way? So I took a less of an advance, and tried to make my own way. And I think the thing that Breed had, and you know, I don't want it to look like I'm coming down on his legacy, but Breed had his own setup. Breed was the premier artist of that label, and whatever deals that they had. But it showed me you don't just have to buy a chain with your money.
Right.
You know, and another thing it showed me was how off my game I was. We would go to Breed's house, and Breed would have every drum machine lined up, MPC 60, MPC 62, 2000 XL, and they would just be making beats and rhyming, smoking all this weed. This is the first time I'm like seeing like active weed smoking.
Okay. And
freestyling their necks off. Like the Black Thought level freestyling. And I'm sitting there like, and I thought I was nice. This shit is incredible. So all this stuff, like I said, it was school. Like I got to get my production game up. I'm getting my rhyme game up. I'm going to buy a house. I'm going to figure out the independence of being actual working musician. And the result is Incognito, and a lot of people don't know Incognito due to the whole Biggie thing. You know, Biggie comes out and they think that Incognito, like songs like What's It Like, the single, is a stab at Biggie when I made the record 2 years before the existence of Biggie. So it's like, you know, it's so that cloud probably hampered that because the record started to do, the single was doing well, actually.
Well, and Incognito came out before Biggie.
Yeah.
It actually came out before him too. So
yeah.
But with the Biggie stuff, what, looking back, not only how did it impact you as more so as a person, but then also what did you learn? How did you adapt? Like what was that process after he said the line?
Anybody who's into Marvel Comics, there's a character called the Super Adaptoid. That is me. I will adapt to any situation. And I think with the Biggie thing, it was a line in a record, for God's sakes. It wasn't like you talked about my mom. You know, he just said a line. Like, he wasn't the first or the last rapper to say something about me. And
I remember Tim Dog had said something too, then.
Him and others.
Yes.
So it's not like it didn't, you know, I heard the record a year before it came out. So it wasn't, you know, it wasn't anything. I just think that when the bandwagon culture really started at that point, so now that everything is all about Bad Boy, or at least on the East Coast, because it wasn't like that anywhere in the country.
I'm glad you said that, because one quick side note of history lesson that people really have to understand is that Death Row outsold Bad Boy at least 2-1, and it was closer to 4-1.
Yes.
People really don't understand that.
Yeah, and like
it was not equal at all. Death Row was way bigger.
Yeah. So
I
can go anywhere in the country and have no issues. Right. Let it be an East Coast city like New York, Philadelphia, you know, something like that. Biggie. And which is cool, you know, it was what it was. But my understanding was it showed me the elitist attitude of a New Yorker. That you think that it's all about y'all stuff.
Right.
It is not. It's not. You know, and it is a very impactful era for the New York scene. Yes. The Tunnel, Bad Boy era, all that stuff is very impactful for the New York music scene. But you take it outside, 8 hours down the road, it's a whole nother story.
Right.
And so it was very disenchanting to me to go home and have to deal with false rhetoric due to bandwagoners. And I thought that was just, I did not feel bad, but I felt bad for people.
Okay. Now, all that being said, for me, I kind of didn't know what was going on for a long time with your music career until the Drew Hills and the LLs, which is several years later.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people probably didn't. So I want you to explain like what was going on in your life and what was going on with you musically before you had this amazing renaissance and started, you know, taking your talents to other places.
It's weird. My life, like I said, I felt like a old retired guy. I'm 24, 23.
Okay.
And I felt 63.
Wow.
Like I did a whole stint. And now I'm trying to figure out the latter part of my life. And you know, it was weird. I would sit there and I would be presented with all types of different things. Like I have an uncle that's a college professor. He's like, hey, you can help teach rap at my college for college credit. So I super considered that, and then that fell through. Then it was like my mother would call me like, hey, I know an eye doctor. They can help you and you can go to school and you can learn how to make lenses. The fuck? But that was an option. I'm sitting there
I
like,
wouldn't have thought of that
right.
one. That's for sure.
I would probably like use all the lenses for my own personal eyewear collection. And then I had a good friend of mine, Andrea. Andrea was the female lead in the Nasty video.
Okay.
And she's gone on to be a superstar makeup artist and all that. But Andrea was linked up with this arts program in Lincoln Center in New York. And she was like, yo, would you go to Lincoln Center and teach whatever you want to teach? I'm like, yeah, sure. Does it pay? Because I don't have any money. Yeah. So I get to Lincoln Center, and the whole proposal, I sat down like, look, we're going to open up a studio. There were these projects, right? There was the high school performing arts on the same block, another high school, Martin Luther King, and then Amsterdam projects. And I'm like, we're going to bring all the kids from the neighborhood, and we're going to empower them. We're going to teach them how to creatively write, rhyme, sing, produce, and we were going to get a budget from the city, and I was going to build this studio, and then on the off time, it could be my studio. Week 1, week 2, week 3, I'm sitting there watching kids do their homework. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm a babysitter now? What the hell?
Right.
So I'm literally getting paid to wait for my stipend to come in and empower these kids, which is another lesson that taught me that it's bigger than music. And I think that back to the responsibility of an artist, I think it was my duty and responsibility to do this because the pay was shit. But my full intention was to teach these kids. They bought me this Casio keyboard. They stuck me in the basement. And we did a couple of classes, and then the budget died. Boom. So I'm out of that. But then another opportunity opened up with a repertory theater in Harlem called Impact, and it was the same deal. I get there and want to help do music for this repertory theater, but it was also a youth empowerment thing. And I said, okay, maybe this might be my calling. I'm still actively making records and doing stuff, on my own. But they always catch me with, you get your own studio. I'm like, yeah, let's go.
Sign me up.
Yep. So I'm in there, and then it turned into like it was that, and it was a better situation. It turned into more of like a family situation in Harlem, where I literally got my new energy. Being around like-minded individuals, being around educated individuals, having great studio equipment at my disposal, literally at my disposal. My creativity went up 1,000%. Showmanship went up 1,000% because we had to take these kids on the road and do actual shows. Production level, learning how to do stage production and just a whole other side of things. So shouts to Impact, and we were running things out of this place called the Minnesink Townhouse in Harlem, and it was like a historical place, actually the original location for the Cotton Club.
Oh wow!
And they run a black fraternity and sorority, the Order of the Phoenix and Featherman. It was like a black Native American type of fraternity. So you saw a lot of empowerment happening during this thing. So again, the pay was shit, but the experience was probably one of the greatest experiences of my life, because with that, I ended up being able to use equipment that I was never had the option of using, and then I ended up being able to start purchasing equipment that I was never. That was all I was about was equipment. So it got to the point I was living in this 1-bedroom apartment in Harlem, and the whole bedroom turned into a studio by the end of the situation. So the cool thing was Dame Dash had a group called Diamonds in the Rough, and he had a basketball league out of Menacink. So when they were playing, they would hear the beats upstairs. So Dame and them would come up, so now the word is starting to get out. Kwame had beats, talking to, artists.
Always did, by the way.
Yeah, hey. Now they know.
Finally.
So between that, and then I have a friend in Philly. His name is Rick Young, and I would go to Rick, and I would literally, I would furnish every drug dealer in this neighborhood who wanted to rap. I was furnishing all their beats. So I was literally, actually, now I think about it, that's how I was getting the equipment. Now, I swear I would take the Peter Pan bus to Philly, stay there for a weekend, and come home with rent, equipment money. And Rick had the studio, I had the music, and we pretty much did anything a label would do. We would furnish them with the music. I would produce the records. We would find a manufacturer. We would manufacture. And this is the time when everybody wanted to be in state property. So everybody was a rapper in Philly, and 90% of them were good. Wasn't whack. Nobody was whack. So, there was just a different Beanie Siegel every day. Everybody had the same skill set. And it was dope. So being with Rick and learning, implementing what I learned from the Ichiban thing about putting a label together and putting out records like independently, hand-to-hand combat, and being over here in Harlem with Impact and learning how to be a responsible artist, all culminated together. And the icing on the cake, a friend of mine, a protege of Herbie's, actually one of Herbie's rap group members when he was in a rap group, a producer named Ron Amin-Ra Lawrence, who was now one of the hitmen for Bad Boy. Right. He produced Money, Power, Respect. He produced Hypnotized. He did
HU alumni.
Yeah, and Ron lived on my block growing up, and Ron, came check on me to see if I was okay and what I was doing.
Two Kings in a Cipher.
Yep. Ron and D.O.C.
For those that know.
And I started playing them beats, and he was like, "Yo, man, I can sell these beats, man." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Yo, I can sell them." You sell them? He said, I can get you $3,500 a beat. Like, $3,500? What? That's more equipment. So I gave him a beat CD, and literally in 2 weeks, my life was back to, he said, "Yo, man, we just landed 3 records at a time." I was like, "What are you talking about?" Mary J. Blige and 3 LL Cool J records. All for the beat CD. I'm like, wait, I gave you only like 7 beats, so you're telling me 4 of the 7 just got sold? Like, yep.
And it was for $3,500, or with those artists you got more?
No, they were all $3,500 beats.
Wow.
And there's the new part of the game that I'm learning, because Ron was like, "Look, your name is shit out here. You can't go under Kwame. You gotta, and it was like, it was a joke, the name K1 Mill, because it was some stupid. I was doing like a dance record for somebody, and I was acting like a robot. I was like, "I am the K1 million. I'm here to take all your panties," or some stupid. Literally, that's what I said, and the name stuck, K1 million. So just use that name. All right, whatever, man. Okay, I just want my $3,500. Right. And my publishing. Yeah. And you're not doing this. So we did actually another song called "And the Winner Is." It was a Scholastic school book that LL rapped. He put out this kid book, and I did the music for that. And then I did for his album 10, a record called "Throw Your L's Up," and 10 Million Stars, which is probably my favorite production ever. And then for Mary J. Blige, we did the opening record. I did the opening record on her No More Drama album, her biggest selling album, and a song called Love, which is probably my least favorite production ever. And,
well, break them down. Why the best? Why your favorite and why the least favorite?
10 Million Stars, if you ever listen to that record, that beat, that is the most from the gut, from the heart track I've ever made. It probably is the most, because the record that I sampled was a song from the movie that actually inspired me to do everything, which is Fame. And it was the ending finale song called Body Electric. And that soundtrack, that album, 100% is the fuel to any fire that I have. As a kid, I would, for hours, act like, I have the drums. I would have the drum set on, and I would play the drums to the album for hours, play the piano to the album for hours. This is pre-rap, anything. So that album is my super inspiration. So to be able to use that record, to be able to get the clearance, and I personally think I just murdered the shit out of that sample, because it's nothing like the record. I'm not into like looping. And then LL Cool J, to me, is the greatest rapper of all time.
Thank
one
you.
of them.
No, he is.
And so to be able to sit with him as he's writing a record, because there was always rumors, LL don't write any records. Yes, he does.
I've seen him myself,
yeah.
So I know he does.
Sit with the man to write a record. And then the funnier part was, none of them, Ron never told anybody that I did the record. And it's not a diss to Ron. Ron was selling Ron. So when I was there, back in the days, pre-Pro Tools, you had to go to the studio and actually lay the beat down and actually do some work. So when L walks in, he's like, Kwame, what are you doing here? I'm the guy who made your record. He's like, what the fuck? You made these records? So that's how the word got out. Then Throw Your L's Up. It's technically, I'm a featured artist on the LL Cool J record. He's like, you want to do the hook?
Yeah.
You want to do the record? You want to do the hook? Sure. I'm like, oh shit, I'm on a record with LL Cool J. So, actually, I turned the song in with the hook. Okay. And he liked the hook so much. He was like, you just do it. You might as well be the one doing it. Okay. I'm not going to sound like you. So I'm going to be honest with you, man. It was like, I almost had a panic attack going into that studio, because it was like being in purgatory for 10 years, and then somebody just letting the door open and say, okay,
come back in.
Come on back. And you sit there like, what?
Now, what was, prior to being released from purgatory, what was your relationship with LL, in your heyday as a solo artist?
Mutual, hey, what's up? That's it.
No real relationship, just more like...
No, like mutual respect.
Okay.
So being in that situation, I don't show my excitement like that. So I just, I go into the studio, but I literally was on some, I think I'm sick. I don't think I can make the studio session. And I'm like, yo, you're fucking having a panic attack? What?
Right.
And it's the overwhelming, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know what other kind of situation someone can be in life to describe. You think you're going to remain in something and you don't think you'll ever get back to anything. And then all of a sudden, with one phone call and one cab ride downtown to 54th Street, Sony Studios, your whole life is immediately changed. Immediately. Like I bought a car, I bought equipment, I was able to, start saving and actually paying bills and actually living an actual life. Before that, it was Struggle Nation. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I was the president of Struggle Nation, and the placements just kept coming. You know, Ron did a great job at selling records.
K1 move.
Yeah. You know, but it just got to the point where it's like, all right, people just knew to start calling me. You know, Ron had a different price than Kwame's price. I bumped up to $7,500. You know what I'm saying? It was like, you know, hey, let's pay $7,500, or what are we gonna pay? $50,000? Like, what are we gonna do here? So, you know, it was one of those things, and I think just kept going. You know, I wasn't going to allow anything to disrupt the new wave of being out publicly doing music.
From our last conversation for the Soren Baker show, you had told us you were working on the new Vivian Green project.
Yeah, Vivian, and also I have a rapper from Queens named Bobby J, and those two projects I'm super working on, but I'm just real proud of the work that everybody's doing, you know, especially Bobby. Vivian's a vet, so she knows what to do and what not to do. But working with Bob, it's like I call it's like just being free in the studio. It's we're not adhering to. It feels good to not adhere to things, to not adhere to A&R or adhere to what's on the radio or anything. We're just making straight hip hop. Now, whether people like it or not, that's on them. But what we feel like we're making our purest version of the hip hop that we like. You know, thing with Bob is from Queens, from a different part of Queens, from a different aspect of Queens life. You go to Bob's neighborhood, you know, predominantly Irish. It's on the beach. You would think you were in Venice Beach somewhere. You would not think you were in Queens, New York at all. Kids are surfing, kids are doing that. But here goes Bob.
Yeah, the Queens I'm used to is Cambria Heights.
Yeah.
It's a little different.
Yeah, and Bob wants to rap. You know, Bob, you know, I've known Bob is probably 30 now. I've known Bob since he was 14. So,
okay.
You know, he wants to rap. You know, everybody around him is looking at him like, why? And what are you doing? But he raps exceptionally well. And the cool thing about him is he's a student of the game. You know, when I first met him, and, you know, he was brought to me through like a business channel or whatever, and I was just doing business. And I would say, yeah, when I was growing up, I liked Big Daddy Kane. And he didn't know anybody past Jay-Z or Eminem at the time.
Okay.
But then he comes to the studio next time and knows every Big Daddy Kane record, verbatim. Or he knows I like Slick Rick. He knows all the Slick Rick records. And he just digs deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper to the point where it's like, Bob, I don't know if you should be a rapper anymore. You might just want to be a A&R guy or a musicologist or do something. You could do something else. But, you know, so on one end, I'm dealing with that. But then you have the Vivian Green stuff, which is a total polar opposite, because she's in a format. She's in urban, adult, contemporary. Mm-hmm. And that format has a small box, a very small box. So we have to be as creative as possible while sticking to a formula that people don't want to give up. Mm-hmm. And so it's like my studio life is really like a night and day situation. But, you know, it's dope.
It is what it is, y'all. Well, Kwame will be coming back for part 3 soon. Here
part 3!
On the Soren Baker Show. This is turning even more epic every episode. But thank you as always for coming through,
thank
Kwame.
Thank you for having me, man.
It's always a pleasure speaking with you and getting to learn a lot from your greatness. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me.
Yes, yes. Soren Baker Show, Kwame, we're out.
Peace.